design schools do a really, really poor job of helping you understand the importance of communication. 50% of good design is, if you come out of design school, 50% of the time, you would think that I just need to do good work and it will speak for itself. But that's not true, right? Like once you worked in the industry for a while, realize that 50% of good design is like doing the work. The other 50% is you being able to tell a good story and articulating the reasons and motivations and the rationale for your design decisions.
Hello, friends. My name is Kirill, and you're listening to my UX Career podcast. On this podcast, I'm sharing my personal thoughts on how to start a career path in UX, how to grow your skills and become a better designer. Also, I have conversations with other designers and design leaders trying to show that there are many different perspectives and opinions on the key questions about UX career. So if you're a UX designer or considering becoming one, this podcast will get you better prepared for finding a job in UX. Opinions expressed on this podcast are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of my current or previous employers. And don't forget, this is just one human's point of view. Also, if you're interested in UX career insights and some key learnings from my experience, you can sign up for my newsletter about UX career. Go to newsletter.uxcareer.co. Now back to the episode. Today I'm speaking with Stanley as a part of the Q&A with Design Manager series. Stan is the Director of Experience Design at a digital agency in Vancouver. We talk about his journey in design, how he transitioned to the management role, how he would stand out if he was applying to jobs today, the value of the previous experiences when switching careers, tips on portfolio and resume, and the future of the collaboration between product designers and product managers. Stan also shares the team structure, design, and interview process they currently use at Domain 7, where he works today, and a whole lot more interesting insights for designers looking for a job. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome, Stanley.
Hey, nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy that we could finally find time to chat and share what you know with the audience. And I really appreciate your time. So today I'm talking to Stanley Lai from Domain 7. He's a director of experience design there. And this is obviously a brief introduction, like a summary, but let's hear from you. What exactly is what do you do there? And what's your current role? And what's the scope of ownership there?
Yeah, so I'm currently, as you said, the Director of Experience Design at Domain 7. And so Domain 7 is really an organization where we focus on transformation and change. So as much as we do the traditional work of UX as an agency to help governments and universities and other community and nonprofit organizations build and leverage technology to help them serve their communities and their residents or their students better. We are also interested in the culture of the organization and how their organizations shift as they adopt technology. So we really operate in two spaces, both the technology piece as well as the people space as well of technology. And so I really love the balance of work that we strive for in the work that we do there. Scope of ownership, I lead the design team. A lot of the work I do here is in mentoring and developing our people, developing our practice, being the face of design for the organization in a lot of ways with our partners, as well as the education that we bring to different organizations, help them think differently about the practice and the work of design. So a bit of a broader scope there, and we have a really emerging practice in new areas of strategic and transformation design as well. And so that's a big part of my efforts in the organization, is developing some of those new practices and new verticals as we step into them.
Mm-hmm. I'm really curious to understand a bit better. What do you mean by working with culture with your clients? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the work that we do. One of the things that I always like to share when I chat about this is oftentimes when an organization wants to adopt a piece of technology, such as a new CRM, a new CMS, a new kind of business management application that either we are setting up for them or we build one for them, you cannot just take your old culture, your old structure, your old ways of working to the new technology, right? One of the great equalizers that technology or digital transformation brings to an organization is access to information. A lot of times when you think about information, that's the demarker of hierarchy in an organization. Because I'm the CEO, I know the most information, therefore I'm the CEO. If you are, the person who's at the front lines talking to customers, some people might think that in a traditional structure, you're at the bottom of the totem pole because you know the least, right? You have the least power and the least access. I think in today's in organizational life today, I think that's turned upside down because as we think about customer centricity, we think about being in front of customers and how important it is for us to be customer obsessed, as some companies might say. It is so important for us to be so connected to that. And who are most connected to the customers in an organization? The people on the front lines, the people that we might traditionally think as being the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. And so there's a big shift there. And so I think with new technology, with more broader access to information, where anyone within an organization has much more tremendous access to knowledge about customers, about the company's operations, about different opportunities that the organization is pursuing, it really changes the landscape of power, and it really changes the landscape of innovation within the organization and where ideas come from. And so we really like to work with organizations to shepherd them through that transition. And so to really leverage the opportunity of technology also means to really think differently about the way your organization is going to work and how you relate with the people, not just outside of your organization, but within as well. And that's a really, really great place to be in.
Mm-hmm. It sounds a bit more like what I would call change management as a huge component to this. Is it a part of the scope of your team?
Yeah, no, not change management specifically for our team. One thing I like to describe when we think about change management is also like, what is the change you're moving towards, right? That needs to be designed, that needs to be considered, that needs to be understood. And so our design team does step into that space of thinking, where should you actually be? And then when you understand that, change management and those practices start to come into play to have that transition happen. If folks are interested, it's actually a space of design called transition design that thinks specifically about that, of how do you create those transitions and how those transitions and changes actually need to be designed as well. And design methods and approaches have a lot of value to that conversation, which is really cool.
Very interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it's quite a unique offering from an agency, from a digital agency. Like, I don't think I have heard something like this before.
I like to think so.
Unique value proposition.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about your previous steps and like what really led you to the current position and the current, I guess, stage in your career. And maybe you can touch a bit more on the key milestones or key chapters of your career.
Yeah, I'll try to go through briefly, but yeah, I started my career in design really from Singapore, where I grew up, and a lot of that started from, I think, a pivotal point when I was thinking about college, and I was wondering about, am I going to do like IT or like comp sci, or am I going to do design, which at that time was this newfangled thing. I think it was still called new media design, when Flash and all that stuff was in all the rage. And I was like, well, I know the computing stuff, like sort of code, I knew HTML, CSS, and I could do, simple JavaScript and all of that, simple ones, of course. But I was really curious about this new media design and what that was about. And it was like design, but for computers. So that was really interesting. So that's why I got my start. And it was fascinating, I think, space to be a part of as the space was growing so quickly, and there were no rules, right? If you remember back in the day of how websites were, every website was different. There was so many permutations of how you could approach it, and it was a fascinating place to be. You get to break the rules because there were no rules, and then over time you started to figure out what the best practices were and what the approaches were. So from there, I got my start in advertising, and then from there I came to SFU, did the School of Interactive Art, the program over there, which took a really academic approach to design and design research, which I really, really enjoyed. Gave a lot of structure and a lot of really looked at how design is something that can be studied, right? Not just done, which I really appreciated. And so that got me my start into user experience, as we call it today, into thinking about not just the visuals, not just about mind share or attention and all those different things, but really thinking about the experience that someone would have. Did they achieve what they set out to do? Was that delightful and enjoyable? was that did they kind of achieve the goals for themselves and for the business, right? And so starting to weigh those things that are sometimes held in tension was a really interesting problem to be dealing with. And so from there I started going to startups. Mobilify was one of my first jobs. I still remember. I had a really good experience there. I had the privilege of a really good boss that taught me a lot and modeled a lot of things. And then from there going to startups as well. I was at Charitable Impact for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I kind of grew from into kind of a design leadership role as well, or that was where my start was. And then finally here at Domain 7, where I joined as a designer, and then eventually being the director of design here as well.
Would you be able to share a bit more? How did you transition from the individual contributor, like the craftsperson, and kind of how did you segue into the leadership position? And first of all, why? Because leadership is not for everyone. So I'm curious to hear kind of what was your journey there?
Absolutely. I would almost describe myself as a reluctant leader in some sense, because this is not a direction that I necessarily saw my career going. I was very happy in an IC role. And so one of the transitions that happened for me was one of my previous jobs at Charitable Impact, where I joined, in fact, as a front-end developer, because I really wanted to work with them, and then moving on to show them why product design is a thing, and then did product design, started to build the practice and lead a team there. So that was my start, and so that was a really interesting experience. It really shaped a lot of my understanding of the work of leadership, the work of management, and why it's necessary in a lot of ways. And what happened there was that initially it was me stepping to the work of product design, right? And doing product design, making some of those decisions, everything we was associated with a product design job, right? Building the wires, figuring out the problems, working with developers, doing a lot of partnership and shepherding the process, right? From first figuring out the problem to, what's shipped and what's live in production. But one thing that started to strike me very quickly was it is not enough to know how to do good work. What you really need as well is an environment that allows good work to happen. You need to have an environment that appreciates the value of design, that gives you the room to explore and to make mistakes, that understands that iteration is part of the process and part of the work. You need to make many mistakes till you find the right answer, right? Because you try many different things. That understands and is able to demonstrate the business value to the rest of the organization of why you need to make this investment into a space or a process that's fundamentally ambiguous, right? You're stepping into a good design, a good meaty design problem. You really don't know, if you're being honest, where you're going to end up. And that's the beauty of the design process, is you get somewhere, but you kind of have to go with the process. You kind of have to go with it. If you know where you're going to end up, then really it's not a very ambiguous or meaty problem. And it's something that you can run on best practice or heuristics, right, to know your solution. And so you do really need to work to create that environment where you can comprehensively actually explore a problem space and create value, a meaningful value at the end of the day for both the business and the people that you're serving. And well, as a charitable impact, we're really exploring the problem of how do we think about the role of philanthropy in Canada, right? And how do we create a new culture of philanthropy? And so that's a big, meaty, problem to really wrestle with and to think about. And so that was the transition for me, was the shift from primarily being an IC to doing the work of management, because I needed to create that culture and I needed to create an environment that gives the team the room to play and the room to really explore and experiment and to find meaningful solutions to genuinely complex problems there as well.
That's a very interesting story. I would like to ask additional question though.
Yeah.
So, and as I understand, in your case, this transition happened when you were at Charitable Impact, right? Mm-hmm. So I wonder, because I've heard this from some folks, that sometimes individual contributors, designers, when they want to transition to leadership, they may experience some, I guess, friction or some level of struggle of convincing the leadership team, the leadership of the company, that they have the chops to do that. So it's almost like the leadership team it's almost like a leap of faith, and they kind of can delegate and trust that you can do the management job, because it's quite a different job. So I wonder if at Charitable Impact you were lucky, or maybe you just kind of built to this and you started doing this before you officially transitioned or before you kind of started taking this responsibilities. So I wonder, how did you make this leap from individual contributor to the management?
Yeah, it's definitely a very informal shift, and I'll say the same thing for Domain 7 where I am right now as well, where the shift, in terms of how that happens, and it's a common story I feel, at least for me. I think everyone has a different journey, and so I absolutely did the work first in a lot of ways. And I like I said at the beginning, like I see myself in some ways as a reluctant leader. So I looked at it with a very design lens, where like, okay, we need to do good design, and I know what the right way to do it or the thing we need to do. But no one's really listening, or like no one really understands why we need to be open to the ambiguity, right? Or recognize that you time box this, and we know the outcomes that we are trying to impact, but we don't know what the solution is, and we need to have room to be okay with that and to work through it. How do you create an environment where that actually allows to happen? And so I wasn't thinking about like, oh, we need a manager and that's or a lead, which was my title, to make that happen. Like, that wasn't what I was shooting for, or that I needed to create. It was really that was a problem that needed to be addressed. And so that then led to the process or the approach that I needed to take to do it. And it's the same at Domain 7 as it was at Charitable Impact. Was I started to build connections across the organizations, talking to folks from different teams, helping them understand the different ways of approaching it. I was the first product designer on the team when I first started. And so, I needed to educate and work with our full stack developers, our product management team, and all of that, and the business partners to understand what is the approach for us to solve a problem, right? It's not just about like, oh, I have this user story and like, okay, I'm just going to build it, right? It's not that. You need to have something there to figure out, what is the solution? Can you validate it and do all those different things? And who's going to manage that process? Who needs to kind of run with that? And so you start with you being the designer who's going to start doing that, over time. And I think a lot of that once over time, as you continue to do that, as you have more your capacity is stretched, and people naturally think like, oh yeah, we need headcount. We need more people to support in this endeavor because, well, Stan's a bottleneck now, right? Like there's not enough time. And so that continues to grow. And so then that's where you start to step into the space of like, okay, who needs to manage this process? Who needs to ensure that this process is going well? Who wants to take the ownership of that? And that may or may not be you. I'm really encouraged that a lot of organizations now promote like a dual track progression and all of that, you don't have to be a manager to progress in your career. And so if that side of like the process management, all of that is not for you, like that's okay, and do the other stuff. And like my team, the senior designers and principal designers of my team love to rip on me that I call myself a designer, but like all Stan does is Google Sheets, right? And Google Docs and Google Slides. That's literally all I spend my time on.
And emails.
Yeah. And I just had someone ask me a question on Figma. I'm like, oh crap, I have no idea what you're talking about. The last time I touched Figma was like a year ago or something like that. And it looks completely different now. So
yeah, the toolkit definitely changes with different responsibilities. I've heard this many, many times. It's almost like presentation. So basically communicating to different levels of leadership and clients potentially.
Yeah.
So it's emails, presentations, documents, all that stuff, way more than Figma and the real design stuff.
Yeah. The way I talk to some folks about it when they ask me about this is that it's still the work of design. Your canvas is just very different. So rather than screens and pixels, you're now working with people and processes and systems. The same skills that you've developed over the years are still extremely relevant, just a different space.
Exactly. I completely agree. It's the same user-centered design, but in that case, you have different users, they have different needs, but you still have to go through the same process of understanding what they're trying to get out of this and delivering the right thing to help with that. And in the management, I guess, role, it's not necessarily mock-ups or specs or anything like that. It's really communication and visions and frameworks and strategies and all that stuff. Even like the headcount structure. So it's also kind of just a deliverable for their particular need, right? So it's definitely, I completely agree. It's kind of, it still starts with understanding your audience and really working to get them, to help them.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the things that you wish you knew when starting your career. So, and obviously a lot has changed since you started, and like all the steps and lessons learned and takeaways from your particular experience, from your journey. What was maybe surprising to learn? What was really something that maybe thinking about right now, you wish you knew at the time when you were starting?
Yeah. And this is something that is funny. It's like it's very so different from when I started my career because I'm like true and true design school all the way. I've been to three different design schools on from three different countries,
Mm,
and so my background and my step into design was purely like deeply academic, and I wouldn't have it any other way because that's the way I think, that's the way I learn, and I really enjoy that. But one thing that I did realize through that was that design schools do a really poor job of helping you understand the importance of communication. 50% of design of good design is, if you come out of design school, 50% of the time, you would think that I just need to do good work and it will speak for itself. But that's not true, right? Like once you worked in the industry for a while, realize that 50% of good design is like doing the work. The other 50% is you being able to tell a good story and articulating the reasons and motivations and the rationale for your design decisions to help people understand that design is not irrational. It's a deeply rational piece of work and process. Every action that you take has a reason, and you need to help people understand that. So good work doesn't sell itself. You really need to be able to communicate that really well. And one thing that's really interesting from that is that one very different pathway to design that exists today that didn't exist when I first started were the people who go through boot camps or the people who are shifting mid-career to design and UX and
mm,
things like that. On one hand, I feel like there's a real struggle that they have, trying to get recognized and being acknowledged for the investment that they've made of their time and their skills and the things that they learned there. But
mm,
one thing I've consistently recognized the value of people who have done a mid-career switch, their more mature stage of their life or their careers and switching into design is a lot of them coming from other careers uh, do an excellent job of communication. They do an excellent job of speaking for themselves, of speaking about their work, of understanding where other people are coming from, and helping that drive their design process. And that's something that I've really appreciated, and I think one thing that I tell a lot of folks that I mentor or I coach who come from a boot camp or things like that is don't undervalue and underestimate how much of a value you bring because you are a natural communicator, at least compared to folks who come from more traditional programs, right? A 4-year design program or whatever. Is you're such a leg up in communication. And that's something that's so much harder to learn from reading a book or from sitting down somewhere, right? And that's huge. So I think I'll say, to answer your question, running back out, the one thing I would have told myself is communication and to practice that and get really good at that, and not wait till you're done with school to do that. And I think for the folks who are coming out of the boot camps or switching mid-career who are really struggling, it's like you really have a leg up in so many ways because of communication and because of what you've learned from your prior careers. Especially love people who come from retail. Brilliant communicators, brilliant at understanding what people need. That's a natural thing you pick up from their previous careers and they bring to design. Excellent. Anyone
yeah.
can figure out Figma. Anyone can figure out interaction design rules, right? You can just need to read a book. Being a good communicator and listening, so much harder.
Yeah, I agree. It takes definitely more time. How would you really, I guess, recommend learning the communication skills faster if you haven't had a previous job, if you haven't switched careers? Because from what I've seen so far, that it's much easier, not much easier, but more effective to learn this and to practice this when you're in a real work setting, regardless of what the career is.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of more a transferable skill after you experienced working with other people and collaborating and really sometimes maybe hitting some roadblocks when working and trying to
Mm-hmm.
partner with different project or like team members. So coming out of school and obviously kind of from the, I guess, the design skills, like the hard skills point of view, you might be more qualified and like a better expert than like a career transitioner. But from the communication skills, as you mentioned, like all the design programs that you went through, and I've heard this from many folks that the communications piece is downplayed. It's not really highlighted as a critical component to being a successful designer. And I wonder if it's even possible. What do you think? Is it possible to teach that and help students practice this while they're going through these programs? Or is it only when you're in a work setting?
I think it's I'm not sure what the experiences, how like what experiences people have today and how the design education is structured because I know it's getting better. I still teach at SFU occasionally now, and I do see attempts at like shifting the education to reflect communication more. But I'll say as well that different schools place a different emphasis on it. I know some of my experience in past presentations are sometimes optional, right? And so I would say is take in when you're in school, like take every opportunity to present. Every opportunity you have is go do that. Get feedback from people as much as you can, whether it's from your professors or from fellow students on how the presentation went.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also as well is take every opportunity to do work outside of class. Freelance projects, volunteer for someone who needs, like some sort of project done. There are tons of people with needs out there as well. Find opportunity to do those as well, and put yourself in an environment where you're real constraints, where you actually have to negotiate, where you actually have to tell a story to someone who needs to be convinced rather than wants to be convinced. And yeah, just take all the hard knocks and learn from those.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Let's move on to a bit more tactical questions. Thinking from the point of view of a junior designer or an entry-level person who is trying to get into the field, and considering how much more competition they have today in this segment of the market, what would you do if you were in their shoes to stand out from the rest?
Yeah, I would say that if you're coming out of a boot camp or you're coming out of like a 4-year design program, my encouragement would be to do projects outside of class. I think that really that helps you stand out very easily because any hiring manager is going to have the same projects across the table again and again and again. So that definitely gets stale after a while. If you've done any sort of work, even the smallest work, even the simplest piece of commercial work where someone actually paid you to do it, makes a very, very big difference because that means that you had to deal with real constraint and you demonstrated enough value that someone actually wanted to pay you for it. And for me personally, even the simplest commercial work you've done and that you've shipped places a high bar over any sort of schoolwork that someone might have done. Yeah, so to me, I think that's the easiest way for someone to stand out today to me is to do that. And anytime someone has demonstrated that, I always do a double take on their resume or their portfolio to really scrutinize the other parts of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the other piece that I really appreciate is that, and this might be deeply personal, so I don't pretend to represent all hiring managers, all design
totally.
managers.
That's the whole purpose.
Yeah, is I really do not like extended case studies. So I've seen so many case studies that are really long. You go into a lot of detail. It's really not helpful. At the end of the day, they all look the same, and they all say the same things, and it really doesn't tell me anything about you and what you're trying to do. What I really want to see is in a good case study is something that's really concise and something that demonstrates to me that you really understood the problem. And it's much harder to say that in less words than more words. And so are you able to accurately convey to me that you understand what the real problem here is? Any insights that you developed, through your work, your research, and all that kind of stuff. You can just list down the methods that you use, but you don't have to tell me exactly how you did it in a lot of ways. And then tell me how you solved it and any sort of impact or any sort of outcome that come on the other side. So I would say be very concise, demonstrate to me that you really understand and know with precision what the things that you're trying to do. And then save the detail for the actual interview. That's when I would really want to press into some of those things. And I think if you do know what you're doing, your skill and your knowledge and understanding of the methodology tends to be clear from any screenshots you might demonstrate or any kind of process that you're describing in terms of how you solve the solution. So it always catches my eye when the case study is brief, but precise and demonstrates an understanding of the methods. Because I think a lot of other folks hide behind the verbosity where they don't actually understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, makes sense. So this is a good segue into the portfolio question. So maybe let's go a bit deeper here. So you mentioned on the structure and I guess the format. Can you maybe call out any clear mistakes that you can think of that, besides the super long and the lack of prioritization and clarity projects, anything else?
Yeah, common mistakes are, I think, people who are not transparent about who else they worked on a project with or what their contributions are. That's usually the number one question that you'll get. If I have 100 portfolios that I'm reviewing and yours is one of those where I'm not sure, I'll probably dismiss it unless the work is outstanding in some way. But generally, I'll just assume that you are hiding something. So being clear about contributions is, I think, really, really valuable. Generally, I'll say I like a smaller number of projects as well. Show me that you know what jobs you're after, or what kind of skill set that you have. So I don't like it when someone has like a bunch of like UX work, a bunch of photography, and a bunch of whatever. Show some precision. Like, I mean, by all means, have a personal website that showcases the breadth of your skills. But I think being precise and just show me the three items that you want me to look at, and that's it. Don't make me have to choose. Choose for me, because you know your work best in some ways. So I find that usually more helpful. The overall structure, I think, for me personally, some variation of really three things that I try to look out for is what is the problem you're trying to solve? What insight did you develop, which is usually your research and things like that, and how did you solve the problem? Your solution, and describe the different ways that you solved it. And then finally, any sort of outcomes, impact that came out of it. With a school project, that usually tends to be a little bit harder. But even if you mentioned about what you learned and mistakes you made and what a second revision looks like, or if you did a second revision, that's usually helpful as well, because that shows a reflective practice that you're someone who's able to learn and teach yourself, which is, I think, what is really valuable in a junior position that a manager would want to look for.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And what about resume? What does a great resume look for you? Maybe you can recall some resumes that really kind of burnt into your memory as great examples.
Yeah. Just be, again, very concise and very clear about your job history and the things that you've done. I would be honest, personally, for me, I almost never look at a resume. I mean, that's wrong. I do look at a resume. I look at your portfolio first. So have your link big, clear somewhere. Just show me the link, even if it's clickable. Bonus points. Don't make me copy and paste. But yeah, the portfolio absolutely takes priority for me. And after that, for me personally, then I'll look at the resume and I'll see a bit of your history. I like seeing. Personally, for me, like I don't look out for like any gaps in history or whatever. Like, usually our HR team would catch those things and they'll highlight it for me. But what I personally pay attention more for is what did you do at those jobs? So responsibilities can be helpful, but what do you succeed in? What do you achieve? What was on the highlights for you in those jobs? Maybe the things that you learned, maybe things that you experienced. All those things are really helpful. Even if you're a junior and you're coming in with not a lot of design related backgrounds, I'm still excited to know about the things that you've done, and how connected, and whether there's any connection within those roles to what you do as a designer today, or how it influences you. So the resume to me is almost like your life story a little bit, of the influences that you're bringing to your job today. And especially for people with mid-career switches, I'll say for me personally, don't be embarrassed. Like, some people I've seen are embarrassed about, oh, I want to hide the fact that I did this or I did that or whatever that's not related to design. I'm like, don't be embarrassed. I actually want to see it. Show me that you understand how the background and the skill sets that you've learned translate to the design career you're going to have today. And that's highly, highly valuable, because something that I really appreciate and try and build a team around is people with diverse experiences and backgrounds, that you come with a different perspective. And that's what helps you to solve problems in an interesting way, because you bring different things to the table, right? So I think that's something that's highly valuable to a resume. And that's what I would want to see personally.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing point that you should not kind of be ashamed or hide your previous, chapters of the career, especially when you're transitioning career. And back to the point that you made earlier, that usually there would be quite some overlap of skills, particularly like in the communication and like working with other people on the team, that you could highlight, and you kind of, massage it to be, somewhat more aligned with what a UX designer would need to do in this job. So I think it's definitely would be valuable, especially to piece together this puzzle of the person's background when you're trying to get like more diverse team and the team members. And I think all those additional flavors to different experiences definitely help you achieve that. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, don't oversell yourself, but like, be honest.
Yeah,
and being honest is also sharing what were the things that you experienced and you saw and you learned. So, yeah.
But also be careful. What I kind of seen as well. Some people that just put all their previous stuff, and like I was like, no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely it shows like just kind of maybe copy pasting from the old resume or something
Yeah.
else, without really being smart about how do you really communicate and articulate
Hmm.
how your profile, how your candidate, I guess, experience is relevant
Hmm.
to this job that you're applying to,
Hmm.
which it definitely should be.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of people do where they may have like a lot of different jobs or they make career switches. They might just leave the title, like the names, and then just for the ones where you feel highly relevant, like add a description to those, right? And so that also tends to shorten and simplify the resume and draws my focus. So
Exactly.
yeah.
It's all about the focus. One more question about resumes.
Hmm.
Talking about, I guess, traditional text-like resumes versus creative format. What are your thoughts, and do you have any preferences?
Text all the way for me. Again, this is deeply personal. I think everyone's gonna have different expectations. But personally for me, I don't like the bar graphs of like your skill sets, of like where relative to whatever. I mean, everyone's gonna put an 8 or a 9 on everything. Like, what does that tell me? So I don't like, to me, it's like don't try too hard. It's fine. Like I honestly don't spend more than 5 or 10 seconds looking at it. I know what I'm looking for, which are the things I just talked about, and I just cue in on those. So yeah, like I would say, don't sweat it. Just keep it simple. Just tell your story. Help me understand who you are. Similarly for the portfolio, um, I don't need your portfolio to be brilliant. I want your work to be brilliant. So don't overdo and don't stress out on your portfolio. Even if you have a PDF, frankly, that's okay. Don't feel like you need to have a website. For me personally, and I've had people who send me like a bunch of PDFs they didn't organize, but the work was brilliant. I'm like, you're a busy person. I
Mhm.
get it. It's okay. I just want to see your work and show me the best way you can have that to me, and then let's talk, right? But that's me personally. I know every hiring manager is going to have different preferences and approaches.
Exactly. And the purpose of this particular episode is to really hear your point of view and your expectations. I would like to add like maybe one more comment on what you mentioned earlier about the resume and how would you really how a person could I guess put some content for a particular role, especially for the entry level junior role, when maybe there are no real I guess outcomes or achievements when you wear this role. What I loved what I loved about what you said is that what did you learn there? Like what exactly maybe did you practice or kind of maybe even like some skills or methods of research that you could have like hands-on experience there. I think this would be super helpful from my point of view, especially like I mean like being in the higher manager's shoes, for example, really kind of showing what this person I guess has practiced and how has this I guess skill set evolved over those several roles potentially. I think this was a super valuable comment.
And I think it's reflective of, at least for me, like one of the most important things that I try to look out for in when I'm hiring juniors in particular is two things that I'm looking for. One is that you need to know your fundamentals. Like, do you know your craft? You don't need to be fantastic at it, but you need to know the basics. And two, are you someone who's reflective and learning? Like, have you demonstrated the capacity to learn? So exactly as you said, when you put in your resume the things that you learned and the things that you experienced, the things that you reflected upon, mistakes that you made that you learned from, to me that's a highlight because you know how to teach yourself, you know how to grow. You are someone whom I know, if I'm going to teach, I'm going to mentor, and I'm going to coach, you're going to listen, and you're going to engage with me on it. And that's someone who's going to grow, in the organization and grow in the role, and I know who's going to do great work. So exactly as you said there, I think that really reflects that focus on the reflective and learning practice for the individual.
Yeah, I think growth mindset is a must-have for every designer, like regardless of the level. But if you're junior entry level, quite often this would be the primary focus area you want to put focus on, just
Absolutely.
because you haven't achieved anything yet. So I think
Yeah.
it's definitely yeah, I would double down on this too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the future and what do you think will happen with the I guess the designer like UX designer role as a profession itself, and also the UX leadership and maybe like yeah how you think, and again we're just guessing, how you think would this industry will change.
Yeah, that's actually a big part of the work that we're doing at Domain 7 right now in terms of how we think about the
Hmm.
maturation of the design discipline and the practice and the industry as a whole, right? There is a really good there is I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of her name, but there's this design academic that I really appreciate her work. Is her name is Sabine Juginga. I think that's how I pronounce it. Sabine Juginga. So she does really great work around exploring the practice of design management and the practice, the evolution of design. And then one of the things that she sees is that the escalating path of design maturity within organizations comes in 4 stages. It starts from design as functional and visual, which is like your features and all that kind of stuff. And it goes on to design that is focused on like the systems and the organization. So you start thinking about the teams and the dynamics and the services and the processes and interactions between different pieces. And then finally is design as strategy. So design is driving strategy, driving businesses, shaping how businesses are thinking about how they want to grow, problems they want to solve, markets they want to enter, and all of that. And so design's application in those different domains. And so I think this is what we're going to see. The people who are leading the market, or in any industry, you will see design being applied at those highly strategic levels, right? Where design practices, user insight, and all those different things are driving the business decisions in an organization. And then in the mainstream, I think we'll start to see that start to show up more and more as typical business practice is to have design within that. And so we will see that even today in like most MBA programs have some level of design education that's there, right? That's how you know it's mainstream at that point. And so as more of those folks get out in the marketplace, as that influences business thinking more and more, I think we're going to see that evolution. And so that's going to have very big implications for the role of design for designers. Today, when you think about designer or UX designer, you're thinking about the screens and interactions and all those things that are solving. When you look at product designers, different people might define it in a different way, but I would say the distinction of a product designer is that you're not just thinking about the screens, right? You're not just thinking about those things. You're thinking about the business problem, right? What is the business context of this screen or this workflow or this interaction? And you're looking at the intersection of those things and ensuring that whatever the design, digital solution you're offering addresses those things as well. So even in that little leap, I think we start to see that evolution of that practice. And we're going to see more and more where we have more emerging practices today of like strategic designers, which is a new position we have in our organization. You start to see business designers and all these different spaces where design is being applied in those different spaces, in those different realms, where you really are not working on the screen, but you're creating the context for the work that we need to do on the screen, right? Developing the strategies, building those businesses, building those business models, and etc. So for the right designer who's interested in those spaces, is an incredible opportunity and domain and space for a much larger mandate and influence for design within organizations for the things that you want to do. But if you're purely interested in just working on the screen and more power to you. That's amazing stuff that you get to do, and I personally enjoy a lot as well. Working within that space. Because of the work that other designers are doing, setting that up, the hope, and at least that I hope and that we try to do on our team as well, is it creates a greater opportunity for good design to happen, right? Because now you have good strategies, you have user-centered practices coming down all the way from the business models and the business strategies to the products and the touch points that you now be designing. So that's where I see the evolution is starting to emerge in the expansive role that design will have, which I think is a really exciting space. And we're starting to see that not just in traditional legacy businesses that are adopting design, but within startups as well. Some of the startups that I'm advising and stuff like that, you start to see that conversation start to appear there as well, to have design influence at that level, the way those companies and their products are going to be shaped at the highest level.
Interesting. Do you think that it means that if there will be more and more product designers showing up in the organizations, how would this affect the product manager's role? How this partnership would work? Because it seems to me that there's, I guess, growing overlap of what the expectations are of a product designer versus a product manager or product owner. So have you thought about this? Like, what will happen there?
I love that. That was exactly something that I was wrestling with a little bit recently, where I had an aha moment. I'm like, we both do the same jobs, don't we? We are very, very close.
There is an overlap.
And that's amazing. And I think that's where I love the fact that we see there as an overlap, rather than I think the tendency for some folks might feel is like, oh, I'm stepping on your toes and you're stepping on my toes. And so that overlap, I think, is fantastic that we are both aligned in terms of what we're trying to reach for and what we're trying to do. That as a designer, like I want to be in the business to understand, design decisions I need to make because I want to help you be more effective. And similarly, a good product manager needs to care about the solutions and care about the design. You need to understand that space so that they can set up the designer to be successful. And I think the way that I've come to a conclusion, the way I like to talk about it is we both are interested in building a good product, but we both come at it from different directions, even if we are overlapping. So the product manager will come from the business perspective and own the business case and own the viability of the idea in terms of coming from that angle. And the designer is going to come from the perspective of, is this desirable? Is this something that I actually want? Right? Is this something that's not I want? Sorry, is this something the customers would actually want, and it would actually address the business goals as well in a way that is healthy and effective. And so that tension is, I think, a place to really thrive. And I would almost want to embrace that. And I think when I've explained it in that way, it's been helpful to clarify the relationship and really embrace the fact that we both want the same things. But we offer a different perspective to that conversation. And that's a lovely thing. That's a great thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Domain 7. And I would love to learn more about how the team is structured today. Like maybe like what kind of roles you have there, how big is the team, and so on. And what design process do you use?
Okay, team structure. So at Domain 7, we have a lot of disciplines within the organization. We have a lot of different groups. And we have designers and developers. Obviously, within the team, we have the project support folks, which would be the project managers, product managers, and the engagement strategists. And so that's interesting mix there because of the type of clients that we work with, which are generally very high touch, people who are addressing digital and technology for the first time. It's not their day job. And so there's a lot of support and a lot of education that we need to do there. A lot of the work we do is, as well as I talked about earlier, good design and good technology requires a lot of good communication and, most importantly, trust, especially in innovation. And so our engagement strategists go a long way in developing that trust and nurturing that for a large organization over time, for us to be able to make bold, innovative decisions together. So that's the overall structure of the broader organization. Within our design team, because we're an agency, as with most, I think we have a team of good generalists across the board, with some specialists here and there as well, who provide some specific skill sets, such as information architecture, strategic design, and etc. Visual design as well. But generally, we have a broad team of generalists in experience design who really take the projects that we work on from end to end, and then specialist supports come in where it makes sense. And so we've started to organize our teams as well around multidisciplinary project teams. And so they stay together, the same developers, the same designers, the same project managers stay in a team together as a project team and then go from project to project. And so this helps build kind of the cohesion and the habits and the kind of work patterns that they enjoy or that they appreciate and can take that forward.
What about the research? Is it expected that a designer would be doing this, or you have a researcher role?
So strategic design, that's a really good question. So there was an intentional part on our recent kind of innovation within our team structure is the role of the strategic designer. And we were purposeful in not naming that role design researcher because our position is we do design research, and every project, without fail, has design research. If the client's not willing to pay for it, we don't want to work with the client. I don't know if I can say that out loud in public.
That's bold.
Yeah, in general, every project has an element of user research, and we take that as cornerstone because you cannot genuinely say that you're citizen or resident-centered or student-centered if you don't talk to people, right? Your design process cannot be user-centered if you're not doing that. And so, at least for the context of the work that we do. So that's a very big important focus for us. And so our researchers are called strategic designers. And we call it that because they develop strategy out of user insight, out of customer insight, out of resident insight, and then from those perspectives, that shapes our product strategy and how we think about what kind of solutions are necessary to effectively meet both the business and consumer goals. And so we call that role strategic designer. Our experienced designers as a whole are generalists. They can do research and all of that, but depending on the type of complexity and the type of depth that's necessary, then we bring different strengths to the table for that as well.
Got it. What about design process? And I understand it will change depending on the project. That's always the case. But what's the ideal flow that you go through?
Yeah, so there is 5 phases of work that I like to look at in terms of our design process, or really our project process overall, because we are a design organization. So we start with learning. So learning is about how we start our engagements. We do that by learning, by listening, by ascertaining the needs that the organization has. So understanding from there. We also want to emphasize the opportunity to engage with stakeholders, both the business stakeholders, the internal stakeholders, as well as the external, the community who's out there. It might be the customers, and some of them might not be their customers, but are adjacent and impacted by their decisions as well. And so we go through this process of learning to really engage with all those different groups and kind of hear the things that we need to hear to inform the process. Then we go into something we call framing. So framing is about developing strategy and helping us establish, really the boundaries of our sandbox, right? So we want to frame out the problem space. So we do this by synthesizing all those different inputs. We run workshop sessions or co-creative sessions with both community and business stakeholders to really create a space where we all can contribute to decision making and contribute to how we need to understand the problem, and then ensure that those different views are reflected. And this is particularly important when we think in the space of public organizations, right? Universities, libraries, municipal governments, where that engagement with the public space is extremely important. We cannot not do that. So from the framing, we step into something we call forming. So forming is about what I like to call finding the silhouette of our solution. So we don't want to figure out all the deep, dark holes that we need to go down, right? Like the colors, the size of the boxes, all that kind of stuff. But we need to figure out the strategic direction of how we want to solve this problem. You might call it a concept, of like that approach. And we often would do something like a design sprint or something along those lines. We never do like a straight up, I wouldn't say never. I don't find it very often we do a straight up 5-day design sprint, but we do variations of those sorts of formats to kick off that forming process, right? Of finding the form of a solution and then start to develop those things even more. And then from there, we step into the 2 last phases of our work, the building. So that's where we get into like the nuts and bolts of like an agile sprint cycle, iteratively build out our solutions and build out the different pieces of work, and then go into launching. We want to launch a pilot, we want to launch an MVP, we want to launch, whatever platform or thing that we were doing. There are activities that are involved in that as well, in preparing the team for that launch, both from our team and the customer team as well. And so launch activities is there. And one thing that we like to emphasize is we want to create an opportunity for every discipline to be participating in all of that. So even in the design phases, the developers have a big part to play in the creative process. And similarly in the development or the software development process, obviously designers have a role to play there as well. You might hit a hard roadblock on a piece of code or a type of architecture. The designer can come in and say, you know what, I can actually make this look a different way that would remove this roadblock and help you get your job get done faster. And that's a really important part and reason for multidisciplinary teams and why teams should be integrated. And so that's, I would say, it's like the 5 steps or the 5 phases in which we like to approach our process.
Sounds like a solid framework.
Yeah, I hope so. We will learn. There will be problems, and we'll continue building on it.
Yeah, obviously, and that's kind of always that's always I guess applicable to working in real world experience with the real clients and the real people.
Yeah,
always iterate and learn based on every next learning takeaway. Okay, so let's talk about the interview process for a designer, and the second question. About the entry-level junior roles, how frequently, if you do, the company hires the junior folks?
Yeah. So our interview process looks a little bit different. Like we're in a process right now of evolving what our interview process looks like. But generally what folks can expect is there'll be a first screening call with our recruiters. So they'll check in with you, ascertain your interest, introduce you a little bit to the company, make sure we are aligned in terms of what we're looking for and what you're looking for, some of those early stage questions. And then from there, usually what we'll go into is to a portfolio review conversation. So usually about an hour and a half, where we expect you to come in with 2 or 3 projects, then just share with us the story and kind of, really diving deep into some of those things, which is why I say on your website, the portfolio website, we don't really need the detail because we want to have the opportunity to sit down with you and we will have that deep, dark conversation about all the mistakes and all the different ways and having that real deep conversation about your design process and your approach and really step through that. Previously, we would have followed that up with a whiteboarding process and things like that, but generally we've done away with that for most of our interviews. As we look at junior and entry level hires, we are considering is still keeping that for that space, because like we said, there are challenges with junior portfolios and things like that where they all tend to look the same, and so that's a good chance for us to give them a more of an opportunity to show off, is the way I like to put it, to demonstrate their skill sets.
You're referring to the whiteboarding exercise?
The whiteboarding exercise, yeah. And so the way we like to approach it there too as well. And again, I'll say it's evolving, so anyone who does apply might look slightly different, but we try to make it as equitable as possible. So we time box it. We so make it fair for everyone. If there's any accommodations that people require, we will try to meet it. We try to set it up as like just a 1 hour session that you come into, no preparation required, and you just work on something together. We also often say that we don't really care about the actual solution you end up with. Like, we want to have some sort of conclusion, but we are not here to rate the final conclusion or like the outcomes that you have. What we really want to look at is the way you think, and the way that you like to approach a problem, and the way you hold a conversation with us as we try and work on the problem together. And those are things that I think we really try to look out for. And so I find that often in a lot of the conversations, it takes off a lot of the pressure for a lot of people to feel like they need to come up with something brilliant in an hour with 4 people staring at them. Like, no, it's just a conversation. Let's talk about the problem. Let's explore different things together, and as you would, in any like design team. Obviously, there'll be a dynamic. We are strangers. It's an interview, but we try and tone that down as much as we can. But yeah, we're still figuring that out. We're still figuring out ways to make that even better. So, I expect that whenever people do apply for the jobs we have open, they will look very different very soon.
Got it. And what about hiring junior folks?
Yeah, so junior folks, we tend to have typically 1 or 2 on our team at any one time, and right now, and that is something that we're looking to grow into as well in the coming years, in the coming months and years. That is an area that I think, especially in Vancouver, there are a lot of really great junior talent. There's a lot of people with really great backgrounds who are bringing really valuable experiences from their previous careers to the design space. And as we work, in the places that we operate in, especially in the public sector, that diversity of experiences is incredibly valuable, because we are designing for people with such diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences and diverse needs. We need to have the same on our team as well, and that's something we need to continuously kind of develop. And so we're not perfect by any means. That is something that we need to continue paying more attention to. But this is one way that we can continue to address that, is to have people with different backgrounds. And I think we've got a great talent pool in Vancouver for us to do that.
Yeah, I think it's actually too big of a pool of junior entry-level folks in Vancouver.
Yeah, and
which creates a challenge for themselves,
exactly,
to get through this noise.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's wrap it up. And if somebody wants to reach out and maybe ask a question or just connect and chit chat about design or something else, or maybe clarify something that you mentioned during this conversation, where can they find you?
They can send me an email at stanley@domain7.com. Reach out to me on Twitter. You can look me up, _Stanley Lai, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm there as well. Send me a message.
Sounds
Happy
good.
to chat.
Yeah,
always learning out of a design.
Sounds good. Awesome. So Stanley, thanks again for your time and for sharing all these your personal learnings and your expectations as a hiring manager. This is super valuable, and I think a lot of folks will love this.
Awesome. Thank you so much
for
having me.
Thanks for listening. If you want to see more episodes and support this podcast, the best thing you can do is leave a review on iTunes and share with your friends and colleagues. If you have specific questions you would want me to answer, you can submit them on the UX Career website. Go to uxcareer.co/questions. Goodbye, friends.